Welcome to Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. In this week's program, 4 killed and many others wounded after police shoot at protesters demanding an increase of the minimum wage in Cambodia. Dalit villages fear displacement due to water project in Nepal. Execution of a 19-year-old Sri Lankan male in the United Arab Emirates. South Korean president visits India to advance steel project, and concerns are raised about the eviction of villagers. Targeted assassinations in Bangladesh. Acid attacks on Assam women. Voices of survivors. This week's from Nepal. Stay with us for more on these issues. Welcome to Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. I'm Danilo Reyes. On January 2nd and 3rd, 4 people were killed and many others were wounded when the Cambodian military police shot at garment factory protesters. The protesters were demanding an increase of the monthly minimum wage from 80 to 160 US dollars. Last week, a team of regional labor and human rights non-governmental organizations organized by the Asia Monitor Resource Center traveled to Cambodia to investigate these incidents and the reason behind the crackdown in Canadian Industrial Park. AHRC joined the fact-finding team and interviewed the wounded victims and the families of the deceased. In these interviews, the victims explained why they joined the protest and how the military police severely beat the protesters and dispersed peaceful demonstrations by the use of live ammunition.
So we know that, the strike happened because the government worker, they want to demand for minimum wage, increase minimum wage, and then they just dance in front of the factory. So at around 4 o'clock, the military police just come to get off the truck and shooting and start to beat the workers. That's why workers got so angry and they respond. He said it's appropriate to ask for 160 because the current minimum wage $80 is not enough. He just said pay for the rent and food, it's finished. So if they get 160, it's better.
To discuss this further, we have in the studio Mr. Basil Fernando, AHRC's Director for Policy and Program Development, and a former senior UN officer for the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia. Welcome, Basil. What is the background of these shootings?
It is 21 years now from the first democratic election in Cambodia. Aspirations of the people have improved, also the education of the younger generation. Naturally, people demand a reasonable and a living wage. So increase of salary from $80 to $140 was the demand, and the response was to shoot the workers, killing 4 of them by the military police, which is quite an indication of the type of the political system that exists in Cambodia. Although Cambodia adopted a democratic constitution in 1993 after the elections, it has not moved towards democracy. The control is within a small clique around the Prime Minister, and the military military police are still the dominant force. Move towards a civilian policing has not taken place. There cannot be any democratic development without dismantling of the military police and the disempowering of the military forces, and the law and enforcement be handed over to an entirely law-abiding policing system. Now, Cambodia has not come anywhere near that. Repression is the way the government deals with the legitimate and peaceful protest. So it's a country where the major struggle and the major need is towards democratization and the development of the administration of justice on the basis of protection of people's rights.
For these shootings, what is the responsibility of the government for the shootings and suppression?
It is, of course, the shooting has been by the military police, and it could have happened only with the knowledge of the government. Anyway, once it has happened, it is the duty of the government to inquire, to arrest, and to prosecute. Now, none of this will happen in any genuine manner. The reason is that there is no independent police investigation system. There is no independent judiciary. There is nothing called an independent prosecutors. It's all controlled from the top.
32 Dalit families from Barmajhiya village in Nepal's Saptari district fear displacement. This is due to a drinking water project near their settlement initiated without consultation by the local Chaudhry communities. The Dalit families have been living there since time immemorial, since their ancestors cleared the area and made it habitable. However, the land is still not registered in their names. They now fear that the local non-Dalits might have illegally registered the land in their own names.
गरीब लोग कता जेबे कोई ना हमरा के जगह देने छै जे तैसना देबे ओ पोखर पर जे गेले त ओहिना भक्ता गठन भेले त जे भक्ता गठन भेले ओइ सब के ई छांट के ई जिम्मेदार सब मुंह पुरखा से हटा देलक अपन गठन कर अपन गठन का के ई सब चुपे चाप या लेठना तकर बाद में हमरा को लाठी ताठी ला गाड़ तार पड़ के भगा देबो हमरा सब कतौन देते जगह वो तो भरोसी देते जे दोसर ठिना जेते जगह कतौन देते हमरा के यह जगह जमीन में जटिक जे में बसोबास छै त बड़ भरोस देने ये जे ई हमरा के तोरा के ई बनेबैल दे पानी टंकी देबो ई देबो उ देबो किछो अथी लेटरिंग बना देबो ई बना देबो कतो किछो के उपचार छै.
Ravindra Krishna Pillai, a 19-year-old Sri Lankan male, was executed by a firing squad on 21st January 2014 in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. The family of deceased complains of the denial of a fair trial before the verdict was pronounced. The position of the deceased was that a friend of his employer in the UAE attempted to sexually molest him and that he resisted. His employer's friends tried to flee in his car, was injured in the process, and died as a result of his injuries. However, the deceased was convicted of murder for allegedly running over his employer's friend. The government of Sri Lanka and its diplomatic services failed to intervene effectively and ensure a fair trial for the accused. The draconian nature of the legal system in Middle Eastern countries is quite well known, and under these circumstances, the Sri Lankan government should have taken a more proactive stance to defend the 19-year-old Sri Lankan national. The president of Sri Lanka, Mahinda Rajapaksa, quite recently met Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates, and the ruler of Dubai, and he could have brought the fate of this young man to his attention. However, no such intervention was made. It was not long ago that Rizana Nafik, a young Sri Lankan maid, was beheaded in Saudi Arabia. That execution was severely condemned both in Sri Lanka and globally. Subsequent to her beheading, the government made public gestures such as giving money and building a house for Rizana Nafik's family to ward off criticism. 10% of the GDP of Sri Lanka in 2013 has come from persons employed in Middle Eastern countries. However, the government and its diplomatic services have failed to even provide basic legal and other services for the protection of Sri Lankan employees there. Rights groups such as Video Volunteers and ESCRnet have called on India and South Korea to take measures to address serious allegations of human rights abuse tied to POSCO's steel project in Odisha state in India. The Indian authorities have attempted to forcibly evict people from several villages from their lands to make way for the $12 billion steel plant, in violation of both international legal standards and Indian law. In the lead-up to South Korean President Park Chung-hee's recent visit to India, Indian officials said that they would accelerate the approval of POSCO's project. India's Environment Minister reconfirmed environmental clearance for project's steel plant, in violation of a stay order given by India National Green Tribunal. At the same time, Odisha's Chief Minister approved POSCO's compliance report, a prerequisite for the granting of a prospecting license for mining rights. National and international rights groups have repeatedly urged India and South Korea to suspend the POSCO India Steel project until and unless it complies with international human rights standards. Video volunteers, along with several other human rights organizations, has been documenting the ongoing protests against the project. The resulting video and the report found that Indian authorities have actively targeted those who speak out against POSCO India project with violence, arbitrary arrests, and detention. Local police have barricaded villages, occupied schools, leveled thousands of fabricated criminal charges against individuals opposing the project, and failed to protect individuals from consistent and sometimes fatal attacks by private actors, who are allegedly motivated by the interests of the company and of the state.
इतिपाई विरोध करूछु जंगल जमी उपरे हमर पान प्रकल्प अछि ढिंकिया ग्राम पंचायत लोक मानकर जंगल जमी रे जीविका अछि तेनु पार्लियामेंट रे जेहेतु पास हेछि जंगल जमी रे प्रकल्प करबा को हेले ग्राम सभार निष्पत्ति निया दिबो ओ जंगल जमी को अण जंगल जमी रे परिणत करा जे
हमर जो जंगल जमी और अण जंगल जमी न हो बोली किसम परिवर्तन न हो बोली गाइदला ता सर्वसम्मति क्रमे गृहीत होइछ जंगल जमी अण जंगल जमी न करा जाउ बोली
पंचायत तो पूरा माने सहमति रे ग्राम सभा निष्पत्ति हला जे एठारे जंगल जमी अण जंगल जमी करा जीवो नाही किंतु पोस्को कारखाना करा जीवो नाही बोली निष्पत्ति हेछि सरकार गोटा माने मिछ प्रतिश्रुति लोकन को गां बोले कि एठारे जोर जबरदस्ती कारखाना करियो चाहू उसको हम 8 वर्ष प्रतिरोध करि आछू सेति पई फॉल्स केस सरकार देइगिरी मकदमा ऊपर करिछि जेहेतु जबरदस्त लोक राजी नो जमी अधिग्रहण करुला आम अधिग्रहण को विरोध कर मत से अंचल विरोध जो कर अरेस्ट कर
There has been a recent alarming increase in the number of political killings in Bangladesh. Since the fake elections held on January 5th, the number of political murders has jumped up. At least 25 people have reportedly been killed from the date of the elections to January 23rd. Out of these 25 victims, 10 have reportedly been identified as activists from the main opposition, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, 5 are from the Jamaat-e-Islami, 7 from the ruling party, the Bangladesh Awami League, and 3 from the Jatiya Party, which is an ally of the ruling party. Some of the ruling party men are said to have been murdered due to infighting. The opposition activists were allegedly assassinated by law enforcement agents, either on the pretext of crossfire or after being picked up and disappeared by the state agents. None of the cases have yet been incredibly investigated. It is assumed that justice will be denied to the families because of the country's political culture and due to the inability of the criminal justice institution. 2 young girls aged 12 and 18 were attacked with acid on November 6 last year at Kamargaon village in Assam. The AHRC is concerned that the police have so far remained indifferent towards the investigation, thereby helping the perpetrators. The survivors received no support for their medical treatment after the attack, despite approaching several state authorities. This negates Supreme Court of India's direction to the government on July 18, 2013, that in every acid attack case, the victim is to be paid 300,000 rupees, of which 100,000 rupees is to be paid within 15 days of the incident. The court has also issued directions to ensure that the stocking and sale of corrosive substances are documented. However, none of this is enforced in India. Nirupama Kalita and Karishma Kalita were returning home with her mother and grandmother after a religious ceremony at a local temple when they were attacked by two masked men dressed in black. The men threw concentrated corrosive acids at the girls, causing them severe injury. The family suspects that the attacks is related to past sexual harassment of the older girl when she was a student. The attack caused severe injury on Nripuma's face, ears, and chest, and she is still undergoing treatment. So far, she has had 4 surgeries and related treatment. The family has spent huge amount of money on treatment and requires more financial resources to get her better treatment outside the state.
পুলিচে এতিয়ালৈকে এজন ল'ৰা যিজন কলেজৰ ল'ৰা আছিলে সেইজনক এৰেষ্ট কৰিছে এৰেষ্ট কৰাৰ পিছত সেইজনক মানে জেলত ৰাখিছে এতিয়ালৈ আৰু বাকী 3-4 দিনমান পিছতে আৰু এজন নিছিলে আমাৰ ওচৰৰে সেইজনকো 10 দিন ৰাখি তাৰপিছত বেল্টত তাক মানে কি খালাস কৰি আনিলে তাৰপিছত আৰু 4জন নিছিলে কিন্তু সেইকেইজনকো মানে এতিয়া খালাস দিছে লগে লগে এতিয়ালৈ তাৰমানে তাৰপিছত আৰু ঘৰে আমাৰ ঘটনাটো হ'ল 6 তাৰিখ নৱেম্বৰৰ 6 তাৰিখ ৰাতি 10:30 বজাত তাৰ পিছৰ পৰা এতিয়া আজি প্ৰায় হ'ল 2 মাহ 8 দিন 9 দিন ধৰিব পাৰি এতিয়ালৈ তাৰমানে আৰু বেলেগ একো নতুন মানে তেওঁলোকে পৰিকল্পনা একো লোৱা নাই কিন্তু আজি এসপ্তাহ আগত তাৰমানে আকৌ আমাৰ প্ৰথমতে ঘটনাটো ছোৱালীৰ এতিয়া অৱস্থা ইমান মানে ভাল নহয় বুকৰ তাৰমানে 4বাৰ হ'ল প্লাষ্টিক সাৰ্জাৰী তাতে সেইখিনি মানে সম্পূৰ্ণ এডজাষ্ট হোৱা নাই আৰু কাণ এখন বাও কাণখন মানে হৈছে গোটেই মানে কোচ খাই গৈছে সেইবিলাকৰ ঘাঁ চাহ শুকোৱা নাই আৰু কাণখন আৰু অলপ কমকে শুনা হৈ গৈছে মানে সেই ক্ষেত্ৰত এতিয়া ইয়াতে আমাৰ যিজনী মানে হেড বাইদেউ আছিল তেওঁ মানে 13 তাৰিখে এইটো ডিক্লেয়াৰ কৰিছে যে কাণখন আৰু ভাল নহ'ব এনেকুৱাকৈ কোচ খাই থাকিব গতিকে বাহিৰত নিলে এইটো ভাল হ'ব পাৰে আমাৰ ফালৰ পৰা আৰু ভাল হোৱাৰ ট্ৰিটমেণ্ট নাই
In today's Voices of Survivors, we talk to Maya Sarki from Nepal.
Maya Sarki was beaten in a public place by a group of villagers, mostly non-Dalit women. She had mistakenly accused Jivan Bethwal, a local non-Dalit man, for attempting to rape her when she was attacked in the dark. Maya apologized to Jivan, but the villagers attacked Maya.
जीवन तामाले कुटकुट लसर पसर भएको लुगाहरू पनि मेरो च्याचुक पार्दै अनि त्यहाँदेखि अब कालो मोसो सोसो दलियो जुत्ताको माला 3 स्टेप लगायो मलाई चाहिँ यस्तो भइसकेपछि यस्तो लाग्छ कि म जस्तो पीडित भएर अरू दलित महिलाहरू पनि र यस्तो गरेर के अरे क्षेत्री बाहुनको दबावमा बसेर र चाहिँ बस्नु नपरोस् किनभनेदेखि पछि गएर म जस्तो पनि नहोस् र मेरो छोराछोरीले पनि पछि गएर त्यस्तो घटना हैन नदोहोरियोस् मलाई समाज चाहिँदैन हैन चाहिन्छ तर यस्तो अपराधीसँग चाहिँदैन मलाई
Maya is still awaiting justice. Nepal adopted the caste-based discrimination and untouchability law in 2011. The question of implementation remains. That is all for this week's Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. For more information on these issues, please go on to www.humanrights.asia. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again next week.